My name is Margaret Johnson, and I'm 69 years old. This morning my daughter pressed a stack of legal papers into my face so hard one sheet scraped my eyelid. Before we dive into the story, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel to show your support. And hey, drop a comment below to share your thoughts or anything you'd like to say. Mom, Grace said, not blinking, not breathing, not sounding like the child I raised. You're going to transfer the house to my name and Eric's, so he doesn't get the temptation to leave me. She said it like asking for the salt across the dinner table. Not a plea, not a conversation, a simple instruction, like I was a broken appliance still good for parts. Behind her, Eric lounged on my couch in my living room, working his thumbnail under his t-shirt hem as if that required tremendous intellect. A stained shirt, the same one he'd worn 2, maybe 3 days. He had the remote in one hand and his phone in the other. Slouched so deep the cushion remembered him. 2 whole years he'd lived in this house without paying a single bill. 2 years of my electricity, my water, my groceries, my patience. Now they wanted my deed too. I stood frozen with the documents in my hands. The air thickened, like every window had slammed shut. I looked at Grace and saw a woman whose eyes had turned cold in some season one must have missed, the kind of cold that didn't happen overnight but like frost creeping down a pain until it found your veins. Did you hear me, Mom? She insisted, tapping the top page with one lacquered finger. We need your signature today. The lawyer is waiting and he charges by the hour. I looked down at the papers. They were real, professional, typed with the kind of sterile confidence only an office with a downtown zip code can give. My full name, Margaret Ann Johnson, my Texas address. The exact legal description of my property. All it needed was my signature. My surrender. My erasure. Grace, I said, and my voice stumbled like it had to cross a cracked bridge to get out. This is my house. It's all I have. She laughed, one of those small, dry laughs that lands like a thorn. Exactly, Mom, it's all you have. If you put it in my name and Eric's, nobody's going to take it away from you. We'll protect it. We'll take care of it, for you. Besides, you're old. What do you need a big house for at your age? Old, she said it like useless. Like in the way, like sign and shut up. Yes, I'm 69, my knees pop when I stand. My hands wear brown constellations they didn't before. I need readers to catch small print and sometimes I forget where I put my keys. But my mind is a clear sky. And my heart, Lord. My heart, still drums with a beat I paid for with decades of sweat. The drum got louder now with something I hadn't felt in years. Not the wildfire kind of anger that makes you slam cabinets. But the kind that gets cold, clean, heavy, inevitable as a river stone. It settled into my stomach and didn't budge. Give me a moment to think, I said, hearing the steel return to my tone. Grace rolled her eyes. There's nothing to think about. Mom, this is for your own good. For everyone's good. Eric and I need stability. Unless you want your son-in-law to walk out and leave your daughter alone? I looked at Eric. He didn't move, didn't turn, didn't act as if his life was being bartered for the price of a property transfer. He stared at my TV with a boredom that made me want to wash the room with bleach. Stability. For a man who hadn't kept a job since I'd known him. Who chose my couch like it was a destiny. I remembered the day Grace brought him home. Mom, this is Eric, she'd said, stars in her eyes bright enough to make me believe they were real. He shook my hand too firmly, looked me dead in the eye, gave me that smile, the one I now know is a mask he keeps flawlessly polished. Mrs. Johnson, he'd said, it's an honor to meet you. Grace has told me so much about you. 6 months later they temporarily moved in. Temporary turned into a calendar I stopped flipping. 1 month, 3, 6, a year, 2. Every time I asked what was next. There was a new excuse that arrived ironed and ready. Now they wanted my house as a relationship brace. Like a ring you don't earn but demand. What kind of love needs real estate to keep it from dissolving? What kind of man stays only if a deed puts a leash on him? And what kind of daughter asks her mother to do that to herself? I'm going to make coffee, I said, setting the papers down. I needed air, and a door between us. And the ritual I'd used for years to keep my hands busy while my mind found its legs. In the kitchen, I closed the door with a soft click. My hands trembled as I filled the reservoir and measured grounds, listening to their murmurs seeping under the door. I knew that tone, irritation laced with superiority. I was being difficult. I didn't understand what was best for me. I was the problem again. I stared out the kitchen window at my rose bushes. My hands planted those in the split heat of 3 Texas summers. Petals bending pink to white, edges browned by last week's scorcher. I remembered the day I bought this house, how I cried in the car lot because the used sedan I picked meant I could make a larger down payment. I remembered every dish I washed at the diner, every blouse I pressed at the hotel, every baby I watched overnight for neighbors who needed shifts. 40+ years of yes ma'am and no problem and overtime, just to put a roof over me and over Grace. The coffee maker coughed to life. Bitter steam filled the small room, a smell that usually calmed me. Not today. Today it just told me I was awake inside a nightmare. I poured 3 mugs and carried them back. Grace took one without thanks. Eric didn't touch his. So, she said, balancing the cup in one hand, "Are you going to sign or not?" I met her eyes that used to turn up like a crescent moon when I read to her at bedtime. Eyes that used to ask, "You promise?" Now I saw impatience, and, God help me, contempt. "I have a counteroffer," I said. Her eyebrows popped. She wasn't expecting pushback. For years I'd said yes. Yes, you can stay 1 more month. Yes, here's gas money. Yes, I can watch him while you job hunt. Yes, 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 words I used like bandages, hoping one would finally stick. A counteroffer? She crossed her arms. Eric leaned forward for the first time, attention like a small animal sniffing the air. "Mom, this isn't a negotiation," Grace said. "You either sign, or you don't." "Exactly," I said, and set my coffee down hard enough to make it slosh. "And I choose no. Not today. Not like this." Silence thickened, then tightened. Grace's mouth opened and closed like a fish gulping at the surface. Eric's eyes went flat, then narrow. "You can't be serious," Grace said finally, a thin edge cutting her voice. "After everything we've done for you." That line hit me like a blow to the ribs. After everything they had done for me. I stared at her, and some hidden door inside me flew wide. Memories poured out, my 67th birthday. The cake going stale on the table as the candles drooped. The 10 p.m. text, "Sorry, Mom, something came up, rain check." Christmas morning, the scarf I picked for her. The leather wallet for Eric. Their paper-thin thanks. The quick escape to a party I wasn't welcome at. The hospital, 5 days of pneumonia. One perfunctory 15-minute visit because the doctor had called to say it was delicate. The ceiling tiles that learned my name that week. The roof leak, me asking if Eric could help. The story about a bad back. The $200 I paid the neighbor to patch it while Eric hauled heavy boxes in a photo on Facebook 2 days later. The small loans that were never small in my budget. $40, $100, $300. Emergency, gas, shoes for an interview. I stopped counting after $2 because the math made me dizzy. "Name one thing you've done for me in the last 2 years." I said softly, "1. Grace opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again, reached for a word that didn't exist because the truth wouldn't give it to her. "We live here," she said finally. "We keep you company." I laughed. It came out like something broke and finally admitted it. "Company," I echoed. "I spend entire days where neither of you speaks to me. You come and go and eat and sleep like this is a hotel I work at in the dark. I'm a ghost in my own home. That's not company, Grace." Eric cleared his throat. "Mrs. Johnson, I think you're blowing things out of proportion. We respect you." I looked him dead in the eyes for the first time that morning, really looked. I saw a 30-something man who had chosen the path of least resistance and called it circumstance. A man who used charm like duct tape until the thing he wanted stopped wiggling. A man who had built a life on other people's couches and called it an interim. Respect, I repeated slowly. Respect is paying for what you use. Respect is not asking your mother-in-law to carry you for 2 years. Respect is saying thank you without reaching for more. His face flushed. Grace stepped between us as if I'd raised a hand. "Don't talk to my husband like that," she snapped. "Then your husband can behave like a grown man and not a teenager on my payroll," I said, and realized with quiet surprise that my voice didn't shake anymore. Grace snatched the papers off the table. "I knew you'd make this difficult. You've always been selfish, Mom, always thinking about yourself." Selfish. The word slipped under my ribs and knifed up behind my heart. I worked 3 jobs so Grace could grow up without seeing the power get cut. I wore thrift store winter coats so she could have the field trip jacket that didn't make her feel poor. I stayed when her father disappeared because someone had to stay. I pawned my wedding ring to put a down payment on her first car. Because the lady at the diner kept late hours and the bus stopped running at 9. Selfish, I said, and my voice broke clean down the middle. I gave you everything. You want this house? You would take the only thing with my name on it and call it love? If you really loved us, she said, and her voice had the polished sound of a sentence rehearsed into the mirror. You'd do this for us. Emotional blackmail always comes dressed like family. If you don't do what I want, you never loved me at all. Get out of my house, I said. The words rose up on their own, strong as a wave. Both of you, now. Grace froze. What? Out, I repeated. My name is on the deed. I'm asking you to leave. Today. Eric stood up. Mrs. Johnson, let's calm down. I am calm, I said, and I was. That river stone in my belly had found its place and I wasn't budging. Leave. Grace's eyes went wide like she'd seen a stranger move into my face. I don't think she'd ever seen me draw a line without apologizing for the ink. You'll regret this, she whispered, rage stiff in her throat. Maybe, I said, but I'll regret it in my house. They slammed the door hard enough to skitter the picture frames. Their car engine revved and tore itself down the block. Then there was nothing but the tick of the wall clock counting every second I had just bought back. My legs trembled. I sat on the couch, careful to avoid the dent where Eric's weight had mapped itself. I picked up the papers and read them again. Slower, cleaner. They were real, too real. Somebody had spent money they didn't have to make them. And the math pointed to me. The $300 last month for a medical emergency. Of course, the emergency had been me. I let the pages fall. They looked wrong lying on my rug like shed snakeskin. I walked through my house like I hadn't seen it in years. The kitchen where I'd fried 1,000 eggs and stirred 1,000 soups. The small dining room where Grace and I used to eat pancakes on Sundays. The bathroom I'd tiled myself 5 summers back with YouTube and grit and 3 extra trips to the hardware store. My bedroom where I taught myself to sleep alone without bargaining with the past. The guest room, their room, smelling of stale air and damp towels. Plates with crumbs. The jacket I'd bought Grace hanging in Eric's closet like some sad trophy. I went back to the living room and sat. The quiet wasn't clean yet. It was the quiet after a storm that still leaves grit on your tongue. My phone buzzed. I didn't move. It buzzed again. Again. I let it go to voicemail. Then the texts. You're a terrible mother. I can't believe you kicked us out. Eric is furious and I'm devastated. I hope you can live with yourself. Every sentence was a grenade designed to blow a hole in my resolve. I turned the phone off and made tea I didn't drink. I stepped out into the yard. 6 o'clock light gilded the roses. The rosemary. The lavender I'd coaxed from dead sticks. The air smelled like wet dirt and green things doing honest work. I breathed. Honesty. That was the word I had been missing in my own house. I had traded too much of it for the pretty fiction that if I just gave a little more, loved a little louder, they would stop asking me to disappear. By the time the sky turned sherbet, I knew what I needed: information. Tired women get exploited. Informed women change the plot. At dawn I sat at the kitchen table with coffee hot enough to scald regret. 17 texts waited when I turned the phone on. I ignored them and typed the name on the papers, Ronald Mason. Attorney at law, downtown office. Mixed reviews, half said aggressive and effective. Half said, too aggressive. Which sounded like the same thing depending on which side of his invoices you were on. I jotted the address. I was about to close the phone when it rang. Unknown number. Normally I don't answer those. Something in my chest said, pick up. Mrs. Margaret Johnson? A man's voice said. Deep, serious, not unkind. Yes, who's calling? My name is Robert Chase. You don't know me, but I need to talk to you, today. It's about Eric Miller. Please don't hang up. I have information you need. The river stone shifted. How did you get my number? I know it's strange, but 3 years ago Eric was married to my sister. And he nearly destroyed her. When I found out he'd married again, I started digging. Your daughter's name led me to you. Mrs. Johnson, your daughter is in danger. So are you. Old fear brushed the back of my neck like a moth's wing. Married to my sister. Grace told me Eric had never been married. Not once. Just bad luck and wrong fits. Where? I said. A public place. The Main Street diner across from the square. 10 o'clock. Please. My mind clicked through every caution I ever coached Grace on. Don't meet strangers. Don't go alone. Don't trust the voice that sounds like a lifeline when you're drowning. But the truth was, I was done drowning. I'll be there, I said. 10 o'clock. Thank you for taking my call, he said, exhaling like he'd been holding his breath for a long time. You won't regret it. I showered. I put on black slacks and a clean white blouse and my mother's pearl studs. I pulled my hair back and looked in the mirror. I saw the lines. I also saw the woman who put them there with honest work. I whispered to my reflection, you can do this. I walked to the diner early. The Texas sun already had opinions. I sat in a booth by the window where I could see the door and the parking lot. I ordered coffee I didn't touch. At 10 on the dot. A man came in, mid-40s. Salt at his temples, jeans and a white button-down that needed an iron but didn't apologize for it. He carried a folder. His eyes swept the room and found me. Mrs. Johnson? He asked. I nodded. His handshake was firm without testing me. Thank you for meeting me, he said, sliding into the booth. I know this is a lot. More than a lot, I said. Start at the beginning. He opened the folder and laid down a photo. Eric, younger, thinner, the same smile he used like a lockpick, standing next to a woman with dark hair. A courthouse behind them. This is my sister, Vanessa, he said. They met on an app. He was generous with attention and light with detail. Said he was between jobs but had plans. Big ones. Married fast. Moved into her apartment faster. He never worked. He always had reasons. The breath left my body. Then found its way back in as a small, deliberate thing. He slid over another photo, Eric with a different woman. Martha. Years earlier. What happened? I asked, though a part of me already knew. With Vanessa, at first it was money for certifications. Then equipment. Then a can't-miss investment. With Martha, it was the same story with new nouns. When they asked questions, he accused them of not believing in him. With Vanessa, when we pushed back, he got, not physically violent, but cruel in the way that leaves bruises in places nobody can see. We hired a pie. We found out he'd been married before. We found this, Robert said, tapping the folder. He pulled out marriage certificates. Eric Miller to Martha Dean, 2015, divorce. 2017. Eric Miller to Vanessa Chase, 2018, divorce. 2020. Then a small county record from 2022, Eric Miller to Grace Johnson. No mother invited. No family present. A text a week later, we got married. It was spontaneous. I'd stared at that text then like it was a sparkler, pretty. Quick. Gone. My hands shook, but I made them useful. I smoothed the papers flat like I did with wrinkled receipts. The ones I saved to prove to myself I had spent carefully. There's more, Robert said. He slid over bank statements, transfers from Martha to Eric over 2 years. He tapped printed messages from Vanessa's phone, Eric asking for funds. Promising big returns and bigger tomorrows. He turned to the last page, an old record from Arizona. 2013. Fraud charges filed by a woman in her 60s. Withdrawn. I closed my eyes. Someone's mother. Someone's widow or someone's only. My daughter isn't going to believe this. I said. Yesterday I kicked them both out after they tried to get me to sign my house over. If I show up with this, she'll say I'm lying to break up her marriage. That's why I brought documents. He said, everything here is public record or paper we can trace. My sister is willing to talk. Martha too. I know the investigator. We're careful because we can't accuse him of crimes we can't prove. But we can show patterns. That's what saves women. Patterns. I looked down at my shaking hands. Then I looked up at Robert, a stranger whose sister's pain had turned him into a guardian. How much do I owe you? I asked. He shook his head. Nothing. I watched Eric hollow out my sister. If I can stop him from doing that to someone else, that's the only bill I care about. I walked home with the folder held to my chest like a bomb and a Bible. I set it on the dining table and spread the pages out. A puzzle where every piece fit too perfectly. Marriage, divorce, deposits, withdrawals, investments, excuses that rhymed across state lines. When night came, my house felt different, emptier, but also scrubbed of a film I hadn't known was there. I copied everything. I put the originals in a large envelope and walked it over to Irene. My 70-year-old neighbor with forearms like rebar and a heart god made from tougher material. I didn't need to say much. She saw my face, took the envelope, placed it in her safe, and squeezed my hand so hard I knew I still had bones. Men like that get dangerous when cornered. She said, "You be careful, Maggie." "I will," I said, and meant it. The next afternoon Grace texted. "We need to talk. Tomorrow at 3 at your house. Eric has something important to tell you. Please give him a chance." I stared at the message. Then at the documents fanned across my table like a deck. I wrote back one word, "Okay." You don't win a war at the front door. You win it with the ground you choose. I cleaned, not because they deserved a spotless stage, but because I did. I wanted everything in this house to report to me for duty. I lined up 3 chairs at the dining table. I set out 3 cups and a plate of cookies from the bakery on Lamar, because civility disarms bullies. I placed the folder at my seat. I charged my phone and set it at my right hand. I tucked a small voice recorder under a ceramic vase Irene gave me 10 Christmases ago. If someone tried to say later I'd twisted words, the truth would be on tape with the clink of cups to back it up. At 2:55, I turned the recorder on. At 3 sharp, the bell rang. Grace came in first, wearing a new dress she couldn't afford. Eric followed with that confident swagger men wear like aftershave. He looked around like he was casing the place, a habit I recognized now as inventory. Not admiration. "Hi, Mom," Grace said brightly, the tone she always pulled out when she wanted something expensive. "Thanks for having us." "Sit," I said. "Coffee?" I poured. I added 2 sugars to Grace's cup because I remembered even when she forgot me. Eric didn't touch his. He was watching me like I was a door he was about to kick in. "So," Grace said after a silence long enough to make its point, "I guess you're wondering why we wanted to come. You said Eric had something important to say." I replied, my voice so neutral even I wanted to take notes. Eric cleared his throat and put on his reasonable face, the one he must keep on a shelf. Polished for moments like these. "Mrs. Johnson," he began, "I think things got heated yesterday. We all said things we didn't mean. I'm sorry if you felt disrespected." "Not I'm sorry we disrespected you. I'm sorry you felt disrespected. The kind of apology that's a mirror pointed at your face." "What about the house?" I asked. He measured his words like he'd weighed them ahead of time. "Grace and I have been talking. We understand it was a lot to ask. We don't want to take your home. That was never our intention. We just want security. If the house is in all our names, it protects everyone. If something happens to you, there won't be any legal complications." Concern dressed like compassion, greed in a sensible suit. "I see," I said. "Was this idea yours, or Grace's?" "Both," Grace said too quickly. "We want what's best for you. For us. For family." I let the silence stretch until it tugged on them. Then I put my hand on the folder. "Question for you, Eric," I said. "How long have you been married to my daughter?" He blinked. "Almost 3 years." "And in those 3 years," I asked, "how many months have you worked?" He stiffened. "I've been looking for the right opportunity. The job market." "I didn't ask how much you've looked. I asked how much you've worked." Mom, Grace cut in. We already talked about this. Eric is in a transition. 3 years is a long transition, I said, not taking my eyes off him. What did you do before Grace? Where did you work? Where did you live? I don't see how that's relevant, he said, and there, behind his eyes, anger flickered like a pilot light relit. It's relevant because you're asking me to sign over my life's work to a man I know nothing about. I said, I know your favorite spot on my couch. I don't know your past. You know enough, Grace said, voice sharpening. He's my husband. That should be enough. Should it? I asked, and let the question sit between us like something that wouldn't blink first. Eric noticed my hand on the folder. His gaze bounced from the manila tab to my face. What's that? He said, aiming for casual and falling short. This? I opened it slowly. This is information about you, from someone who knows you very well. The color drained from his face. I pulled out the first certificate and read it aloud so the recorder would hear me and the room would remember. Eric Miller. Married to Martha Dean, May 15, 2015. Divorced August 20, 2017. I laid it on the table. Grace leaned forward, squinting. This has to be a mistake. Eric told me he'd never been married. It's not a mistake, I said, and slid out the second paper. Eric Miller, married to Vanessa Chase, June 10, 2018, divorced March 5, 2020. This is ridiculous, Eric said, standing so fast his chair skated. Somebody is lying to you. These are fake. Sit down, I said, and the cold in my voice surprised even me. Something in the temperature made him obey. He lowered himself back, but his right leg started bouncing like it needed to run. I spread the photos, Eric with Martha in front of a courthouse. Eric with Vanessa under a cheap arch and cheaper flowers. Grace's hands trembled as she picked them up. Eric, tell me this isn't true, she whispered. It's complicated, he said. Those marriages were mistakes. They didn't mean anything. You're different. We're different. Mistakes, I said. And the money? Also mistakes? I slid the statements across, transfers from Martha's account to Eric's. Then Vanessa's, line after line. She lost her down payment savings. Vanessa almost lost her apartment. That's not a mistake. That's a method. He opened his mouth. No words came. Grace's tears hit the paper like small, clear punctuation. You stole from them, she said hoarsely. It's not stealing if they give it willingly. He snapped, and then flinched at the thing he'd admitted. So it's true, I said, leaning forward. You took their money. They were investments, he said. They knew. Lies, I said, and set down 2 written statements. Here are their words, their receipts, their timelines, same promises, same transition, same result. Grace read, breath fast, shoulders shaking. He said these exact things to me. She whispered, I just need time. You're not like the others. You see my potential. It's the same script. Because it is a script, I said, and you're not the first audience. Eric surged to his feet again, knocking his chair hard enough to bruise the wall. She's poisoning you, he shouted at Grace, pointing at me like I was the problem that ruined a perfect story. She never wanted us to be happy. I want my daughter to know the truth, I said. The truth is that you are a professional manipulator who targets vulnerable women, moves into their lives, drains what he can, and then tries to leave with property he didn't earn. You're crazy, he spit, but the panic behind his eyes blinked like a siren. Am I? I pulled the last record, the old Arizona charge sheet. 2013, fraud, filed by a 62-year-old woman, withdrawn after promises to repay. You never did you, Eric? His mouth worked, no sound. I have Martha's number and Vanessa's. I continued. They are willing to talk to Grace. I have the investigator's card. And the originals of these documents are not in this house. Eric turned to Grace, switching masks so fast I heard the click. Baby, don't let her do this to us. I can explain. Explain what? Grace's voice came out cracked. The lies? The 3 years you refused to work? The way you used me to get to my mother's house? I love you, he said, reaching. She pulled back like his touch burned. I need you. No, she said, and a quiet I hadn't seen in her since she was small settled over her face. You need what I can give. That's not love. His last card flipped. Threat. If I walk out, I walk out for good. You'll never see me again. That's what you want? To end up alone like you're pathetic. Enough, Grace said, tears spilling, voice steady. Leave. He measured us, eyes calculating exits and levers and whether the old tricks still worked. They didn't. I picked up my phone. Fraud is a crime, I said. I can't promise a conviction for what you did to other women. But I can promise your name won't stay clean. The next time you try to reinvent yourself, your pattern will be waiting on the first search page. I started to dial. You have 5 seconds, I said. He grabbed his jacket and stormed out, slamming the door so hard the rose picture rattled. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was relief. Grace stared down at the documents scattered like a map of the wrong road she'd taken. Tears streaked clean lines down the powder on her cheeks. Mom, she whispered, voice shredded, I'm so sorry. I stood, came around the table, and put my hand on her shoulder. For a suspended second she stayed still, then broke, folding into me with a sound I hadn't heard since she was 10 years old and scraped both knees on the schoolyard asphalt. Her sobs shuddered through me. I held her. Some instincts never retire. Some lessons do not need words. When the storm quieted, she pulled back, eyes raw. How did you find this out? I told her, about Robert Chase. About the diner. About Martha and Vanessa. About the pie. About the envelope sleeping in Irene's safe. I wasted 3 years, she whispered, anger at herself blooming red. 3 years. You didn't waste them, I said gently. You learned. I learned I'm an idiot. You learned you're human. Smart women get conned every day because con men practice more than they do. The shame is his. She shook her head. You warned me. You told me something was off. I called you selfish. I tried to take your house. Her voice broke again. How can you even look at me? Because under everything he twisted, I still see you, Grace, I said, and because owning what you did wrong is the first brick you lay back down when you rebuild. What do I do now? She asked. He left with his stuff but we're still legally married. I don't even know how to file for a divorce. One step at a time, I said. First, we call a lawyer. I have a number Robert gave me, someone who's done this before and can make sure Eric walks away with what he deserves. Nothing. I don't have money, she said, and she sounded suddenly so young I had to steady myself. We'll figure it out, I said, but there are conditions. She looked up. What conditions? Therapy. You need a professional to help you understand how you got here so you never come back. Not tomorrow or the next day, a real commitment. Second, work. Independence isn't a slogan, it's a schedule. Whatever your old plans were, we start over. And third, when you're ready. When you're stronger, you apologize. Not the kind you do between sobs so you can feel better. The kind where you stand up straight and say the words and then prove them with your life. She nodded, tears fresh. I will, I promise. Tonight you can stay in the guest room, I said. Tomorrow, we start. Clean sheets, clean plan. Thanks, Mom, she whispered. I stripped the bed she and Eric had shared. I opened the windows wide and let the Texas air argue with whatever he'd left behind. I sprayed lavender and set out fresh towels. That evening we ate simple, tomato soup and grilled cheese in triangle halves like we used to, and washed dishes together without forcing conversation. It was the kind of quiet that heals, not hides. Later, she asked me, when did you know, Mom? I mean really know? I think my bones knew before my brain would admit it. I said, but when you shoved those papers in my face, something old in me stood up, something I'd been teaching myself to hush for years. And once it stood, it didn't sit back down. Grace gave a small, cracked laugh. I should have listened. Probably, I said, but here we are, and here is enough to begin. That night, after she fell asleep in a bed that finally felt like mine again, I made chamomile tea and sat alone at the table. I gathered the documents and slipped them back into the folder. The pages made that crisp sound paper makes when it's about to become evidence. I tucked the folder into my nightstand, not because I needed to reread it, but because sometimes victory is a file you can touch in the dark. I stood at the window and looked out at the quiet street. My house breathed. For the first time in 2 years. It inhaled without asking permission. Tomorrow would bring logistics, lawyers and locks and the small work of rebuilding. But tonight, I had done something women are told in 1,000 tiny ways not to do. I had said no. And I had meant it. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. Not because of age or habit. But because my body carried the aftershocks of battle. My house was quiet, so quiet it rang in my ears. No footsteps padding down the hall. No sound of the refrigerator door hanging open for too long. No couch creaking under Eric's weight. Grace was still asleep. I could hear the rhythm of her breathing from the guest room. For a moment, I just stood in the hallway, hand on the doorframe, remembering the nights when she was little, how I'd pause outside her door to make sure she was safe. Sound, and dreaming. Back then, the only monsters were in her storybooks. Now the monsters wore wedding rings. I brewed coffee and sat at the kitchen table with the folder. Every page was a nail in the coffin of Eric's charm. His patterns were clear as the Texas sky in July. And yet, I knew charm like his didn't just evaporate. Men like Eric always came back. They circled, they begged, they threatened, they promised, they dangled whatever bait worked. That was why I needed a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, someone who'd seen men like Eric before. By noon, Grace shuffled into the kitchen. Hair a mess, eyes swollen. She looked younger like this. Stripped of makeup and defenses. She poured herself coffee and sat across from me. I barely slept, she said. I know. She traced the rim of her mug with one finger. I keep thinking about all the times I ignored you. About how I defended him when deep down I knew something was wrong. It's like I wanted to believe the lie more than the truth. That's how cons work, I said. They sell you the version of yourself you want to be. Loved, needed, special. Once you buy that version, you'll do anything to keep it. She flinched. That's exactly what it was. I reached across the table, resting my hand over hers. Grace, listen to me. This wasn't about you being stupid. This was about him being practiced. You can learn from this. That's the only way to win against someone like him. Learn faster than they lie. Her eyes filled again, but she nodded. So, what's next? We find you a lawyer. We file for divorce. We make sure he can't touch this house again. And then, you get your life back. Her shoulders dropped, as if she'd been carrying bricks for miles. Do you really think I can? Yes, I said firmly, because you're my daughter, and because you're not done yet. The following week was a blur of paperwork, phone calls, and quiet dinners. I contacted the lawyer Robert had recommended, Helen Parker. A sharp-eyed woman in her 50s with a voice like a gavel. She didn't waste words. Eric Miller, she said when I laid the file in front of her. I've heard of him, not the first time his name's crossed my desk. That sentence alone felt like a lifeline. Someone else knew, someone else saw. She flipped through the documents, nodding slowly. We'll file for divorce. We'll freeze any attempt he makes to attach his name to your property. And we'll put restraining measures in place if he tries intimidation. Grace sat beside me, silent, but I could feel her trembling. Helen looked directly at her. Honey, you are not alone. I've walked more women than I can count through this fire. And every one of them thought they couldn't survive it. You will. Tears slipped down Grace's cheeks. Thank you, she whispered. We left the office with a packet of forms and a plan. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt the ground steady under my feet. But Eric wasn't gone. 3 nights later, the phone rang just past midnight. I jolted awake, heart pounding. Grace stumbled out of the guest room, hair wild, clutching her phone. Her screen lit up, her face pale. It's him, she whispered. Don't answer, I said quickly. But the ringing didn't stop. Again. The voicemails came next, his voice dripping honey, then snapping like a whip. Grace, baby, you're making a mistake. Don't listen to your mother. I love you. We can fix this. The next message, if you think you can just walk away. You're wrong. Nobody leaves me, not like this. Grace dropped the phone onto the couch as if it burned. What do I do? We save every message, I said, picking it up with steady hands. We let his own words do the work. The harassment escalated. Texts, calls, a note shoved under the front door one evening, talk to me or regret it. I tightened the locks. I had motion lights installed. I kept Irene in the loop. Her number ready on speed dial. And I reminded Grace daily, fear is what he counts on. Documentation is what defeats him. Still, I saw the toll on her. The way she jumped at car doors slamming down the street. The way her shoulders curled in public, as if trying to make herself small enough to disappear. One night, as we folded laundry together, she said softly, "Mom, do you hate me for bringing him into our lives?" I set down the towel I was folding. "No, Grace, I hate what he tried to take from us. But you're still my daughter, and I'd rather fight this war with you by my side than spend my days wondering if I'd already lost you." She cried into a pillow that night. But in the morning, her eyes looked clearer. 2 weeks later, we sat in court for the first hearing. Eric showed up in a suit that didn't fit. Trying for respectability, his lawyer spun stories of misunderstandings and emotional exaggerations. But the evidence spoke louder. The judge looked at Eric with thinly veiled disdain. "Mr. Miller, the pattern here is concerning. Until this matter is resolved, you are barred from approaching Ms. Johnson or her property. Any violation will result in immediate action." Eric's jaw clenched so tight I thought it might crack. Grace gripped my hand under the table. For the first time in years, I felt her squeeze back with strength, not desperation. Outside the courthouse, Eric tried to approach us, but a bailiff stepped between. His voice carried though, "You'll regret this. Both of you." I turned, met his eyes across the distance, and said loud enough for Grace to hear, "We already regret the years we gave you. We won't regret the years we take back." His face twisted, but he said nothing more. Life after Eric wasn't instantly easy. Grace had to pick up extra shifts. She had nights of doubt, mornings of anger. Therapy peeled her open in ways that hurt more before they healed. But slowly, steadily, she stitched herself back together. As for me, I rediscovered my house. I planted new roses, red ones this time, bold as blood. I painted the guest room walls a bright cream, erasing the shadows Eric had left behind. I hosted Irene for tea on Sunday afternoons, laughter spilling through the windows like music. Grace began to smile again, tentative at first, then fuller. She cooked dinner on Fridays. She paid half the electric bill with pride. She apologized one evening, properly, standing straight, no tears. "Mom, I was wrong. I chose him over you. And I'll spend the rest of my life proving I'll never make that mistake again." I nodded, letting the words settle. "Then start now, with honesty, with yourself, with me." And she did. Months later, when the divorce finalized, we stood on the courthouse steps together. Grace held the papers in her hand like they weighed 100 pounds. "It's over," she whispered. "No," I corrected softly, slipping my arm around her shoulders. "It's beginning." The day the divorce finalized, we didn't celebrate with champagne or selfies on the courthouse steps. We drove home with the windows down. The Texas wind carrying the smell of hot asphalt and fast food and something else, space. The kind that makes you sit taller without knowing why. At the kitchen table, Grace set the stamped judgment between us like a fragile relic. "It's strange," she said. "I thought I'd feel lighter. I do, but I also feel this ache. Like the after-sound when a siren stops. That's your nervous system learning the world isn't on fire anymore." I said, "It'll quiet down." She traced the raised seal with her thumb. "He doesn't get a cent?" "Not a penny," I said. "Not your car, not this house, not even an apology, because men like Eric don't know what one looks like unless it comes wrapped around a demand." Grace huffed a laugh that almost fit her face. "Good." I would have liked the story to close there. Curtain falling neat as a hotel bedspread. But life doesn't end where the judge signs. Not when a man like Eric is used to eating off other people's plates. They don't wander away, they prowl the edge, sniffing for crumbs. The first thing I did was pull the lever on every protection my age and address could buy me. I drove to the county office and filed my homestead exemption in triplicate. I signed up for title monitoring at the clerk's office just in case someone tried to record funny business with my deed. I froze my credit. I unfroze my backbone. Helen, our attorney, sent a list of to-dos that read like armor. Change the locks again. Password protect the utilities. Tell the bank manager. Revoke any old powers of attorney. Keep a binder of all messages. Men like him file fraudulent quitclaim deeds all the time. She said, it's a cheap scare tactic. Get out ahead of it. Irene made me a pot roast and poured coffee the way only women in their 70s pour coffee, strong enough to tell your future. You're doing everything right, she said. Still, leave the backyard light on all night. Motion sensors good, but predators hate light. 3 weeks of quiet enough to make you suspicious, went by. Then the letter arrived, official envelope. County seal. Notice of filing, quitclaim deed. My heart didn't skip, it punched. Absolutely not, Helen said when I forwarded the scan. He tried to record a deed claiming you conveyed an interest to him last month. He forged your signature. How does that even get recorded? I asked, heat climbing my neck. It didn't, she said, delicious steel in her tone. Title office flagged it because you put monitoring in place. We'll file a fraud affidavit today and notify the DA. I clicked off the call and put both palms flat on the table. Grace was standing in the doorway, the color gone from her face. He tried to steal the house, she said, voice barely a whisper. He tried, I said. He failed. She nodded slowly, then reached for the stack of folders we kept on the counter now like some families keep cookie jars. She added the notice to the labeled binder. Eric, post-divorce harassment. Her handwriting was neater than it had been in months. That felt like progress, too. That night we took turns peeking through the front window. The street was the same street. The sky was the same sky. But my house felt like a living thing with muscles again, a place that could brace itself against what came. Grace got up earlier these days. She said therapy had taught her mornings were when you built the kind of life that could survive afternoons. On Tuesdays she left straight from the clinic and went to a women's group that met in the church basement on 4th Street, Financial Independence After Abuse. The first time, she asked if I'd go with her. I sat in the back where the coffee was always stale and the advice was never wrong. That was where we met Martha, tousled gray bob. Smart eyes. A stack of index cards with lists. When Grace told her who she was, Martha blinked back 1,000 things and settled on one. She hugged my daughter like a sister you weren't sure you'd ever see again. I thought it was my fault, Martha said. I thought I was the one that broke everything. But it was the template. He uses people like shapes. Grace looked down at her hands. Me, too. Vanessa came the next week. She and Grace sat side by side. Not to trade war stories, but to swap plans. They weren't victims in that room. They were contractors rebuilding homes that happened to be themselves. I watched my daughter take notes. When she looked up and caught me looking, she smiled, soft, honest, unperformed, the kind that says, I'm here. I'm working. I'm not going back. Eric's next move slid in sideways. Like they always do. I received a text from an unknown number with a link and no words. I didn't touch it. 30 minutes later Irene called. Check the neighborhood page. Someone posted a rant about you. I clicked. A brand new account under a fake name had written 2 paragraphs calling me a manipulative old woman who brainwashed her daughter, and hinting I'd stolen a hard-working man's future. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The comments below did my work for me. Margaret, please. That woman gives away tomatoes from her garden every summer. We all watched that man sit on her porch all day for 2 years. If you're brave enough, post your name with your accusation. The account deleted itself by nightfall. He's getting sloppy, Helen said when I told her. Sloppy is good. Sloppy leaves footprints. Spring tipped into a heat that stuck to your skin like grief. I spent my evenings in the garden anyway. Knees in dirt, hands pruning the old so the new had someplace to go. Grace helped me stake the taller roses. She made iced tea tart enough to scold you. We moved like we'd always moved, next to each other. Wordless when words got in the way. Mom, she said finally, pushing a hair behind her ear with a dirty knuckle. I was thinking, when this is really over, when the lawsuit's done. When the calls stop, I want to host a dinner here. Just us. You, me, Irene, maybe Robert, if he'll come. I want to make your lemon chicken and put real napkins on the table. I set down my shears. Then plan it, I said. Use the good tablecloth. Even if it's a Tuesday? Especially if it's a Tuesday. She laughed, and it sounded like a screen door swinging shut on a safe house. 2 months after the quitclaim attempt, we got a court date for the order to show cause. Eric had to explain why he violated the judge's order with the deed nonsense and the online harassment. He showed up with a new lawyer and a haircut meant to make him look respectable. But the tired lies didn't fit inside the fresh trim. Helen called Vanessa and Martha. They came with folders. Robert sat behind them, a quiet fortress in a button-down. Grace and I took the front bench. I slipped my hand over hers. She squeezed back, and I felt the tremble. But I also felt the tendons. We were made of tougher things now. Eric's lawyer tried to argue that the deed was a misunderstanding, and that the online posts were protected speech. The judge looked over his glasses in a way that told me he'd heard every synonym for lie a mouth could make. You were ordered to refrain from contact and from interference with the petitioner's property. The judge said, you attempted to record a deed and you defamed her in the community. This court finds you in contempt. Eric's face went pale. The gavel didn't slam dramatic, it clicked. Almost gentle, but I have never heard a sweeter sound. Outside, on the courthouse steps, Vanessa hugged Grace. We're not just surviving him. She said, we're outliving him. Robert stepped up then, awkward like men get when they don't know where to put their thanks. He cleared his throat. Sis asked me to say this because she'll cry if she tries. Thank you for believing us. He turned to me, and thank you for not letting him have your house. It made everything else possible. It's my house, I said. My name's on it. Grace laughed through her tears. And it's going to stay that way. Eric didn't disappear. Men like him don't, they just look for the next door. But he faded. The calls stopped. The neighborhood page stayed quiet. The only evidence he'd ever existed were 3 thick folders that lived on the top shelf of my closet in a canvas box labeled Do Not Feed. We learned to measure time in normal things. Grace's clinic gave her a raise after she redesigned their scheduling system. Irene's rheumatism flared and subsided and flared again. I found a new recipe for cornbread that made the whole house smell like a southern hymn. I taught Grace to make the braid pie her grandmother used to make. Our fingers clumsy and sugared. On Sundays, we walked to the farmer's market and bought whatever was cheapest and prettiest. That's a rule with produce. And sometimes people. One evening, Grace sat with a stack of envelopes and a list. I'm paying off everything, she said. The credit cards I used when he told me not to worry. The medical bill from that visit he said I was overreacting about. I want clean ledgers. Say it out loud, I said. She looked up. What? Say what you just did, he told me. Then say the thing you're doing, I decided. She smiled. He told me not to worry. I decided to pay my debts. That's right, I said. We don't use his sentences anymore. She wrote paid in big letters across the first statement and laughed like a woman seeing her own name lit up on a marquee. Not fame, ownership. It was a blue sky Tuesday when the realtor knocked. I opened the door to a man with perfect teeth and the kind of tie that makes you distrust your own floors. Ms. Johnson, I represent an investor who's interested in purchasing your property as is. Cash. Generous offer. No, I said, because I'm old enough to enjoy one-word sentences. But thank you for bringing the wrong question to the right house. He blinked. Ma'am? Men with money have been trying to buy women out of their lives since money learned to walk. I said, this house isn't for sale. Not to cash, not to charm, not to threats. It's not a property to be acquired. It's a life that happens to have walls. His smile faltered. If you change your mind. I won't, I said, and closed the door with the kind of satisfaction that makes a person sleep well. From the hallway, Grace called. Was that who I think it was? Probably, I said, walking back to the kitchen. I told him the truth. She raised her glass of iced tea like a toast. To not being for sale. We clinked. That night, I couldn't sleep, not from fear, from memory. I lay in the quiet and listened to the house settle, wood talking to nails. Pipes clearing their throats. Houses have heartbeats. You notice them when you think something might try to stop them. Around 2 a.m., the motion light tripped. A white wash spilled across the backyard. My body moved before my mind did. I was at the window. Careful, peeking through the side of the curtain. A shape near the fence. A man, hood up, still as a tombstone. My chest tightened, then narrowed into something sharp. I picked up the phone. Hit 1. The recording we'd prearranged with the police dispatch played in my head as it rang, restraining order on file. Recent attempted deed fraud. Prior harassment. 911. What's your emergency? I gave our address, the details, the height, the direction he faced, the fact that my neighbor had a camera pointed at this exact slice of fence. Grace appeared in the hallway, eyes wide. Back room, I mouthed, finger to lips. She obeyed. Another progress. The patrol car was quiet. But a cruiser's quiet still has a presence, tires on grit. Radio chatter leaking from open windows. The shape by the fence jolted. Tried to scramble, misjudged the distance, and caught his foot in the wire we'd run for the tomatoes. He fell hard, and a sound went up that I recognized in my bones. It wasn't Eric. The panic tasted different. The officers handled it anyway. They took statements. They took the neighbor's footage. They took the trespasser's name, someone Eric knew. Someone paid $50 to check if the lady was alone. Men like him outsource cowardice when they can't outsource consequences. Inside, Grace sat at the table shaking. I sat across from her and set a mug of hot water in front of her palms. Tea had to wait, we'd used the last bag. Hands come first. I'm okay, she said, looking like she needed me to say she was. You are, I said. We are. He sent a boy to do a man's job. The law will handle the boy. The box on my shelf will handle the man. What if he keeps trying? She asked. Then we keep living, I said, and was surprised at how simple the answer tasted. We keep calling. We keep documenting. We keep planting. We keep choosing Tuesdays to use the good tablecloth. That's how we win. She wiped her face and nodded. That's how we win, she echoed, and I felt something tighten into a knot we could climb. Summer came in loud. The cicadas screamed like they were paid by the decibel. I started waking before the sun again. But now it felt like choice. I'd water the roses while the air still remembered night. I'd walk the fence line with Irene. Our two shadows long and thin. As if we were taller than we'd earned. One morning, Grace met me on the porch with 2 envelopes. One for you, she said, handing me a pale blue note with my name in her cursive. One for me, she added, holding a white envelope addressed to herself. We sat on the steps and opened them at the same time. Mine read, Mom. I can't undo what I did. I can only do different. So here is the first thing, I'm moving out next month. I found a tiny place near the clinic I can afford. Not because I'm running from you. Because I'm running toward myself. Please come for dinner the first Friday I'm in. I want to set a table with my 2 hands and feed the woman whose hands taught me everything. I love you. I'm sorry. I'm better. Grace. I blinked the letters steady. Pride hurts in the best way. What's yours say? I asked. She swallowed, smiled. It's from the clinic, my promotion. They're making me office manager. We didn't scream. We didn't jump. We sat there, 2 women on a porch, knees touching, and breathed like people who just watched a tide change. The night before she moved, we cooked the lemon chicken and braided the pie on the counter like we were weaving a rope bridge. She packed the last box. She labeled it photo albums, Margaret, and pushed it toward me. These belong to you, she said. They belonged to us, I answered. Now they still do. She slept in the guest room one last time. I stood in her doorway before I went to bed. Hand on the frame, like when she was a child. Like when the monsters stayed on the page. She looked younger again, even with everything she'd learned. Good night, baby, I whispered, and if the word felt too small for the woman she was. It still fit the part of her that never stopped being mine. Her apartment was painted the color landlords think is happiness. We made it real with a second-hand rug and my spare kettle and 3 plants that had never lived in someone else's kitchen before. She hung a photo on the wall. Me, her, Irene, and Robert standing under the pecan tree. The lemon chicken on the table in the foreground. A crease of light across all our faces. She put it by the door so it would be the last thing she saw when she left and the first when she came home. "First Friday," she said, kissing my cheek. 7 o'clock. "Don't be late." "I'm never late to my own life," I said. She laughed. "That's right." I rode the bus home. Sat by the window. Watched the city go by, families. Couples. Men in suits. Women pushing strollers. A teenage boy doing a dance by the bus bench because sometimes you have to let your body celebrate you even if nobody asked it to. When I walked into my house, the quiet greeted me, not empty, mine. I placed the photo albums on the coffee table. I made a cup of tea. I walked to the back door and opened it wide. The roses were fat with blooms. The air moved through the screen like a hymn. I thought of all the women I'd never meet who were sitting at their own kitchen tables with their own folders and their own river stones in their bellies. Trying to decide if today was the day they said no. I wanted to call out to them through the walls. Through the internet threads. Through the courthouse halls and church basements and clinic waiting rooms. It's your house. Put your name back on your life. The next morning, a thick envelope arrived from Helen. Inside, a copy of the contempt order. The fraud affidavit stamped and filed. And a note in Helen's brisk script. "Margaret. It's rare to see a case turn with this clarity. Your documentation and your resolve did it. For the record, you saved not only yourself, but likely the next woman, too. If you ever need me, you know where to find me. If you don't, that's even better. HP." I set the letter beside my teacup and smiled. There are fewer better sentences than "if you don't need me. That's even better." Irene knocked then, bringing a jar of peach preserves and a piece of neighborhood gossip so hot she had to set it on the counter to cool before telling it. "Robert called," she said between spoonfuls. "He wants to know if you'd consider speaking at the group next month. Not to tell the ugly parts. To tell the part where you kept the house." I hesitated, then felt the yes before I found the words. "Tell him I will, but I'm not giving a speech." "What will you do?" "I'm bringing a copy of my deed," I said, and laughed at the look on her face. "And a pen." First Friday arrived soft and golden. I tucked a loaf of bread under my arm and rode the bus to Grace's apartment. I knocked. She opened the door wearing an apron older than she was, my mother's. The one with the faded blue stripes. The table was set with cloth napkins and flowers in a jar. The lemon chicken smelled like home, finding you in a strange place and sitting down. Uninvited, anyway. "Welcome," she said, and her voice didn't wobble. "Thank you," I said, and mine did. We ate. We talked about small things because small things are what big lives are made of. After dessert, she reached under her chair and pulled out a flat parcel wrapped in brown paper. She handed it to me. I opened it carefully. A framed print, hand-lettered, simple black ink on white. "This house has a spine." I laughed until I cried. She did too. We hung it in her hallway right there, between the thermostat and the light switch, where 1,000 thoughtless motions would pass it every week and see it and be instructed. "Mom," she said as I started to leave. "Yes? I know you said I should apologize with actions. I hope tonight counts as one." "It does," I said. "Come by Sunday. Help me thin the roses. They'll bloom better if we cut them back." She smiled. "I'll bring sunscreen." On the bus ride home, under the hum of fluorescent lights and the gentle sway of a driver who knew every pothole by name, I thought, there are lives that take from you, and there are lives you get to build. If you're lucky, you survive the first and get busy with the second. I stepped off at my stop and looked up. The moon was a bright thumbnail. The street smelled like sprinklers and barbecue and a neighbor's dryer vent. My motion light clicked on as I walked up the path. It caught my profile in the storm door glass, a woman old enough to be underestimated and smart enough to use that. I touched the doorframe with my palm, my old habit. My quiet ritual. "Good night, house," I said. "We did good today." The porch creaked like a response. The last time Eric came into our lives, he didn't knock. He slithered. It was late September, the air heavy with that strange Texas mix of heat and dry leaves. Grace was at her apartment, and I was alone, folding laundry at the kitchen table. The quiet had settled sweet, like honey on toast. That's when I heard the rattle at the back door. At first, I thought it was the wind, but then I saw the knob jerk, once, twice, the kind of movement that doesn't belong to a breeze. My chest tightened, but my hands didn't freeze. I reached for the drawer where the phone sat fully charged, right next to the small can of pepper spray Robert had insisted I keep. The motion light flared outside, and for a fraction of a second, I saw him, Eric, same broad shoulders, same jaw, but thinner, sharper, like hunger had been gnawing him from the inside. He didn't look like the man who'd lounged on my sofa for 2 years. He looked like a cornered fox, desperate, dirty, and dangerous. I dialed 911. My voice was steady. This is Margaret Johnson, 233 Pine Street. I have a restraining order against Eric Miller. He's attempting to enter my home right now. The dispatcher's tone sharpened instantly. Stay on the line, ma'am. Officers are en route. Do not engage. Eric banged once, hard enough to make the glass tremble. Margaret, his voice was a growl wrapped in panic. Open this damn door. You think you can ruin me and just sit here drinking tea like nothing happened? You think you can poison Grace against me? Poison. That was his favorite word, his way of turning his rot into someone else's problem. Eric, I called, my voice carrying through the door like a scalpel. The police are on their way. You're violating a court order. Walk away while you still can. He laughed, sharp and jagged. You think I care about your papers? About your little judge and your old lady lawyer? You don't get it, Margaret. I always land on my feet. Always. Grace will come back to me. You can't keep us apart. She already left you, I said, and this time, she saw you for what you are. Silence, the kind that sits heavy before a storm. Then, crash, he threw his shoulder into the door. The lock held, but the frame groaned. I gripped the pepper spray, my thumb resting on the trigger. My heart wasn't racing, it was pacing. Deliberate, like a boxer waiting for the bell. The red and blue lights appeared first as a reflection on the glass. Then the sirens wailed, tires screeched. Eric froze, caught mid-push, like a thief in a photograph. Step away from the door, a voice barked. Eric lifted his hands, palms out, but his smile was wild. Defiant. She's lying. This is my wife's house too. I have a right. Your wife filed for divorce. It's finalized, the officer snapped, and you're in violation of a restraining order. Step back, now. They cuffed him right there on my back porch, under the glow of my motion light, the same light Irene had told me to keep on. He screamed, he spit, he twisted, but the cuffs clicked shut all the same. I watched through the glass, not trembling, not crying, just watching, because after all his lies, all his threats, all his attempts to make me doubt myself, here was the truth in metal and law. Eric Miller was nothing more than a man in handcuffs, being shoved into the back of a squad car. When the door slammed on him, I finally sat down. My knees gave out before my tears did. The DA called the next day, with the attempted break-in, the forged deed, the contempt charge, and the restraining order violations. They had enough to pursue criminal charges that would stick. Grace came over that evening, her face pale but her jaw set. Is it true? They're charging him? Yes, I said. Burglary, forgery, harassment. This time he doesn't get to slither away. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, the same spot where she once shoved papers in my face. But tonight, her hands were open, her eyes clear. I don't know how I'll ever make peace with the fact that I married him. You don't need peace with that, I said. You need lessons. You need scars that remind you what fire feels like, so you don't stick your hand in again. She swallowed hard. And you? Do you forgive me? I looked at her, my daughter, flesh of my flesh, who had betrayed me and yet was sitting here, broken but rebuilding. Forgiveness isn't a gift I hand over like candy. It's something you earn, little by little, and you're earning it. Her eyes welled, but she didn't cry. She nodded, as if signing a contract only she could see. The trial was 6 months later. Grace testified. So did Martha. So did Vanessa. Each woman's voice wove a tapestry of patterns the jury couldn't ignore. Fraud, manipulation, abuse, predation. Eric tried to look smug, but his eyes flickered like candles in a draft. His lawyer sputtered about coincidences and scorned ex-wives. But the evidence piled high, unshakable. When the guilty verdict came, Grace squeezed my hand so tight it left marks. He was sentenced to 5 years. Not enough to erase what he'd done to so many women, but enough to give us all air. Enough to make the next Margaret, the next Grace, the next Martha think twice before believing his grin. Life after Eric wasn't perfect. It wasn't a fairy tale, but it was ours. Grace's apartment bloomed with plants and pay stubs. She cooked for me every Friday. Each meal another apology wrapped in garlic and rosemary. I went to the women's group once a month, holding my deed high like a lantern. Martha started dating again. Vanessa enrolled in night classes. I painted my living room yellow. I planted lavender by the porch. I slept with the windows cracked. Not because I was careless, but because I wasn't afraid anymore. 8 months later, Grace stood in my garden. Her hair pulled back, her smile shy. "Mom," she said, "I'm thinking of buying a condo. Small, mine, no roommates, no men, just me." I touched her arm. "That's the best sentence you've ever said." She laughed. "Would you come with me when I sign the papers?" "Of course," I said. "We'll make sure your name is the only one on it." Her eyes shimmered. "And we'll plant roses outside." "Roses, and lavender too," I said. We stood there, 2 women who had walked through fire, breathing in the scent of blooming things. And I thought, this is what survival looks like. Not grand speeches or parades. Just the quiet act of planting roots in your own soil. That night, I sat on my porch with a cup of tea. The stars hung low, Texas big and endless. I whispered to the house. The same words I'd said before but now with a steadier voice. "Good night, house. We did more than survive. We won." The wood creaked in reply, like it agreed. And I knew, no man, no paper, no lie would ever take this from me again. The story teaches us this. Boundaries protect love. Being a mother doesn't mean sacrificing your dignity or your safety. Abuse hides in manipulation. Sometimes the danger isn't fists, but lies and dependency. The truth is power. Evidence, clarity, and courage can dismantle years of control. Forgiveness is possible, but only when change is real. Every woman has the right to say no, and to keep her name on her own life.